The early days of a training program is pretty great, isn't it? You can add 5 kilos to either side of the barbell, you can easily beat the reps you did last week on your shoulder press, and making that level of progression feels good. But as the weeks go by, some exercises start to feel a bit stuck. You think you're never going to increase the weight on your lateral raises, and it feels hard to just match what you did last week on the leg press, let alone beat it. So that's your sign, right? It's time to move on. Time to get a new program. Time to switch out your exercises. Wrong. Honestly, this has to be the biggest reason I see that women are going to the gym consistently but not seeing the changes in their body that they want. But that's not your fault, you've just been taught progressive overload wrong. So over these next few minutes, I'm going to blow your mind and teach you how to actually use progressive overload so you can start seeing the shape and muscle definition that you've been working so hard for. When we start new workouts, there's a lot of learning happening. You're figuring out where's best to set up the exercise in the gym, you're figuring out how far in front your front foot should be and where the bench should be on your split squats. You're testing out what weight feels heavy enough, but probably starting a little bit light so you can get your technique right. And that continues over the next couple of weeks. Maybe you try a few different benches to get the one with the best height. You start to improve your range of motion. You become more confident with your exercises. You are learning a skill. And because you are getting better at lifts, it's quite easy to add weight and add reps week to week. And remember, right at the beginning, you probably undershot the weight a little bit to stay conservative, to start lighter and focus on your technique, so you're making up for that as well. But there comes a time where that rate of progress starts to slow down. It's not quite as easy to keep adding weight to the machine, and the sessions start to feel pretty hard. You're working very close to your limits now. If at this point your mind goes, I've hit a plateau, so it's time to change my workouts, you are quite literally missing out the part of the program that would be stimulating your muscle growth. See, all of this stuff at the beginning was sub-maximal. You were learning, you were laying foundations. You're not actually 10 kilos stronger than you were the week before. You didn't build so much muscle in just a couple of weeks' time that you can suddenly lateral raise 6 kilos rather than 4 kilos. But each week you are getting a bit better at the skill of the exercise and you're becoming more confident with it. See, when it comes to muscle building training, you need to give your body a reason to adapt. Your training has to reach this certain level of challenge that your body has no choice but to build new tissue to manage what you're doing. But it's not until you've hit that point where you can no longer easily add weight or reps that you've actually reached this threshold of challenging enough to stimulate growth. The weeks before were literally just a vehicle to get you to that point. And now you're here in this sacred zone, you need to stay there. You need to spend time where that rate of progress is really slow, where you can maybe just eke out one extra rep on one set of an exercise. Or maybe you might be able to add those baby 1.25 kilo plates to either side of the barbell, but you lose a few reps from last week that you then spend the next couple of weeks trying to regain. Because when the progress is no longer coming through you learning the skill and becoming more confident at the lift, true progression is really slow because you are just building a teeny amount of extra muscle each week. You are just not that much stronger from one week to the next. Let's use myself as an example. Many of my sessions, I'll go into the gym and just be able to match what I did the week before. I've been doing the same weight and reps on my chin-ups for months now. Occasionally, I'll add an extra rep here and there. Sometimes I add a little bit of extra weight, but it's very gradual. But the fact that I did the same this week than I did last week doesn't suddenly mean that's no longer stimulating to growth. It's still at that threshold of sufficient challenge to build muscle. And that's a common misconception that tells me someone doesn't really understand what progressive overload truly means. I bet you were told progressive overload means adding more each week and forcing your body to get stronger. But it's actually the other way around. Progressive overload happens as a result of you getting stronger. Let me explain that. So you've reached that threshold of challenge where your training is hard enough to stimulate growth. When you're at this level, you're building muscle. But if you were to keep lifting the same weight and reps for months at the same time as getting stronger, there'd come a point where that's not challenging enough and it drops below that threshold of intensity required to stimulate your growth. So your body wouldn't need to adapt anymore. Meaning as I get stronger, in order to keep my workouts hard enough, I have to progress them. I have to add some weight or I have to add some reps over time. So progressive overload isn't you making the workout harder, it's keeping the workout at the same level of difficulty as your body gets stronger. Cool. So what does that actually mean for you and your training? Well, it means that you're going to have to stick with the same program for longer than 4 weeks, that's for sure. And you need to reframe your concept of what a good rate of progression actually looks like. If you're adding weight and reps pretty easily, you're probably still in that initial skill acquisition stage. But if the thought of just matching what you did last week fills you with dread and just getting an extra rep here and there feels like a win, then you know you're doing some real muscle building training. For the women I work with, they're doing the same program for at least 8 weeks, if not 10 to 12. And even then, when we program their next phase, we'll often carry carry through some exercises that they're still enjoying and that they still feel are productive. So they'll often be sticking with some exercises for months and months. From what I've found as a coach is that the sweet spot seems to be around 8 to 12 weeks. It's short enough that people stay engaged and don't get too bored, but long enough that people get past that initial easy progression stage and have enough time to spend where they've crossed that threshold and they're doing the real muscle building training. In my own training, I'll stick with an exercise for months. I'll only swap it out if I really need to, if it's just not very practical to add more weight, or if I'm just a bit bored. So now it's time to go and apply this to your own training. When you start to plateau, think of it as a good thing. You've just reached that golden zone where it's muscle building time. Spend weeks there pushing super close to your limits, and I bet you will start seeing that muscle definition and shape starting to come through that you spent so long working really hard for. I spend all day, every day helping women do just that. So if you want to be guided through the process, check out the link in the description for how I could get you training like a pro and finally actually looking like you lift.